Hello and welcome. I'm Brian Dunphy, producer at Greensboro Community Television, and I'm on assignment. We're going to head over to the International Civil Rights Center and Museum. This place used to be Woolworth's, the famous lunch counter where 4 A&T students sat down and started the most impactful civil rights movement of their time. It spread to 55 cities inside 13 states. Coming up this year will be the 62nd anniversary of that historic event. Now it's known as the Civil Rights Center and Museum, as I stated earlier. We are going to be taking snippets of the tour. Of course, due to copyright, we cannot show the tour due to our agreement with the museum itself. We are, however, going to be giving you some valuable information in regards to the nation's history. Jeannie Dolan is the docent who will be taking us through this guided tour. Accompanied with the tour snippets is an interview with LaToya Wiley, Special Events and Retail Coordinator for the museum.
I've been at the museum since 2014. I started off as a part-time tour staffer, but have since become a full-time employee here. I'm a Special Events Coordinator. Also one of the senior tour staff personnel as well. I do some exhibit design.
She is going to be giving us some wonderful insight in regards to the museum. But to start things off here, we are going to hear an introduction to the tour by John Swain. He is the CEO for the International Civil Rights Center and Museum.
If you would please turn your attention to this wall over here, I'd like to introduce you to the A&T-4. This image of the A&T-4 is the only known image that exists of the A&T-4. And by the way, you are welcome to take photographs in this space and on the outsides of the building. Totally fine. But this image of the A&T-4 is the only known image that exists of the A&T-4. It was taken on February 1 of 1960, just moments after these 4 young men from North Carolina A&T came to this building that will soon be a national landmark to assert their 14th Amendment rights. They are David Richmond with the white coat and the derby hat on. The tallest one in the photograph is Frank McCain, and both of those men are deceased. The next two over, Ezel Blair, also known as Jabril Kazan, and the last is Major General Joseph McNeil. They are still alive. They have helped us to celebrate the 61st anniversary of the F.W. Woolworth sit-ins right here in this building. We hope that they will be available when we commemorate the 62nd anniversary on February 5th of next year, and you are also invited to attend. Now, one thing to keep in mind about these students, they had studied the U.S. Constitution. They understood what took place in 1868 that was quite transformative in this country. For the first time in our nation's history, we knew who the citizen was in this country. And the language in the 14th Amendment states, all persons born or naturalized, shall have full and equal protections under the laws. That there was no equivocation about that. It was the fact and what the founding intenders meant. Now, if you go back and you take a look at that amendment and you ask yourselves, what does it amend? It amends nothing, but it replaces our first 12 amendments that were there. Full and equal protection under the laws for all persons who are born or naturalized in this country. For over 151 years, we have been suppressing the 14th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. But these civil rights fighters, these activists, these young students, they understood the power of that amendment.
Nothing more than a big woven wall hanging, using many different colored threads. Those threads create a pattern. Pictures sometimes tell a story. Before you, a tapestry of sorts, our flag. Anybody recognize the words on the flag? What document are they from? What do you think? Yes, give me an air high five. Yes, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
You know, I'm a firm believer that you cannot change what you don't acknowledge, and you cannot have a clear direction of where you are going until you know where you've been. And I think that learning the history of a culture, a people, a nation is crucially important to all of us. It's important to know. It's not to criminalize anyone. It's not to demonize anyone. But you have to know what happened so that we don't make the same mistakes, that we don't repeat the same behaviors.
Looking at these images, you might think these things occurred way down south. They didn't. The body burning was Omaha, Nebraska. The lynching, Indiana. And the lynching, by the way, is said to have been Billie Holiday's inspiration for her song, Southern Trees Bear Strange Fruit. And every time she sang that song, she got in trouble. This image is what the Klan is most often associated with, the cross burning. The next image, a little girl has been injured, but she was lucky. Her sister wasn't. Her sister was Addie Mae Collins, one of the 4 little girls that lost their lives as they sat in the 16th Street Baptist Church, Birmingham, Alabama.
But that, I think that shows that, you know, where things were civically in our culture and in this country, that young people at that time had a very, very different mindset because they had a very different set of problems to deal with as opposed to young people today. But that is one of the things, one of the messages that I personally make sure that I express to young people when they come here, is that at the very core of this museum, we celebrate teenagers. They are 4 barely out of high school, college freshmen from A&T, and let's not forget the students from Dudley High School who were crucially important to the success of this movement here in Greensboro. So it's important to me that I express to young people that at the core of this museum, it's the efforts of young people that we celebrate. And I want to be sure that they understand the power that they possess simply because they are young. Being young puts you at a unique position in life because you're not saddled with the responsibilities of adulthood, but you also have the rare stickability. You have the ability to stick with things that other people, adults who have families and jobs and other responsibilities, they can't do. So young people have the ability to stick with this movement to see it through. So young people are at a unique and most powerful place in their lives simply because they're young. Young people possess tenacity and a strength that is unique only to youth. And they are at a place that they are indestructible. Young people don't understand no. Young people really believe that I can do anything. Life has not gotten to them yet to show them no you can't, to show them their limits. So for young people, the world is full of limitless possibilities. So it's important that we teach young people to harness that power and use it positively.
She said that on that Sunday morning, the little girls were excited because it was Children's Day and they were going to have charge of the service. So they were downstairs primping like little girls do. But Sarah wasn't in the part of the restroom where the other ones were. And she said all of a sudden there was a loud boom. And she said when she came to herself, she called her sister's name 3 times. Addie, Addie, Addie. Addie didn't answer.
You know, looking towards children in Birmingham, you know, who had vicious attack dogs released on them, fire hoses, fire cannons is what they really were, water cannons, that were turned loose on these children. This is what their courage was met with. So, the young people who came here, virtually, as you stated, came out unscathed. Very little, a lot of people don't know, very little violence occurred here, if any at all. So this was one of the more peaceful protests, but in that, it was one of the more powerful, because really there was a level of maturity that these young people possessed. There was a level of calmness, and this is where we see nonviolence coming forward, really showing that, it's how we represent, how we present ourselves that really turns the tables on the authorities. So it really made the law, it made the city look at themselves. So how do I look arresting these young people?
And this is what I said to Dr. King sitting on that couch beside him. I said, Dr. King, you are going to get a lot of people killed. I heard somebody else say this. I wish it had been my original thought. King will get a lot of people killed because when we saw our people in these demonstrations, they were always cowering and trying to cover up and never really striking back. At the people, pictures of the kids at the lunch counters where white toughs would come in and pull them off the chairs and sometimes kick them and beat them, and they were being passive. Well, I don't know that I could do that, but Dr. King had said, if you can't do it, stay away. So that's one of the reasons why I wasn't at the Selma March.
I think that that's something that young people today should understand, whereas Dr. King has advised Mr. Kilimanjaro that while I understand and appreciate the fervor that you have, it perhaps may be misplaced and it may be used against you. So we have to be in control of that and understanding that we cannot be provoked, as you said. So I think that young people today, they may take a page from King's book and from the protesting blueprints from back then, that while we appreciate, and I delight in the enthusiasm that young people have, there's nothing more that thrilled me more than, late last summer when all of the uprising occurred in the city, and watching just floods and waves of young people in our streets protesting. And it thrilled me to see young people taking to the streets, but to then see how some of them were not able to resist being provoked and harness their emotions. So it's okay to be excited, to be enthused, to have fervor, but you need to know how to direct that and channel it and not allow it to be misplaced, to be forced by provocation. So certainly I think that they should take a page from that story between King and Kilimanjaro.
Auntie's homecoming or something. So I asked him, Mr. McNeil, do you remember which seat you sat in? He said, baby, we were too nervous and scared to be worried about which seats we were sitting in. So even they don't remember, but we do know it was somewhere in this area.
Absolutely. A lot of people don't see Greensboro as a city of change when it comes to civil rights, but it's absolutely at the core of it. Greensboro was a pivotal place when it comes to the civil rights movement. So you're right, if Elm Street could talk and the stories that she could tell from 1960 to 2020, and I think by mirroring that, we can see that there is still the mindset of young people in this city to change, to incite change. So it's still there for what these young people started in 1960. That energy still is alive here, and young people are being affected by it, and they're picking up that mantle that they left behind in 1960 and are continuing to spearhead change, to have a zeal to see change occur not only in this city but worldwide. It's still there. Yeah.
Entrance, segregation, etched into stone. This is an exact replica of the colored entrance of the depot as it stood right here in Greensboro during this time. The museum thought it fitting to use this as an entryway to the battlegrounds, where you're going to see where the civil rights struggle was fought in healthcare, theater and entertainment, hotel and restaurant accommodations, public accommodations, transportation, and all of those other areas where access was denied.
The Woolworth sit-in sparked a movement across the country. It wasn't the owner's moral compass that helped them to decide to desegregate the stores and restaurants where seats had been taken up. It was their wallet. Ultimately, the bottom line was the deciding factor in all of this.
Well, you'll find at the very core of every major civil rights event, it's the dollar that decides. And much like in Birmingham, where Rosa Parks had been arrested, and the community there responded to her arrest by withholding their patronage of the city's transit system, bringing it literally to its knees. They harnessed the power of their dollar, making a change. It's the same as true here in Greensboro in 1960, where young people sat at this lunch counter. It would be the dollar that decided, and it would force the store manager, Mr. Harris, to make the inevitable decision: I've got to ironically get my books back in the black. So, his numbers had gone into the red. He was losing money because people either on one side were not coming because they did not want to see the counter desegregated, or there were others who would not come until it had been desegregated. So on either hand, he was losing money. And he understood, thankfully, that unless and until I decide to make this change, I'm going to continue to lose and eventually close. So thankfully, he chose on the right side of history, opting to desegregate this lunch counter. And as it would be, business would increase because of that decision. And traffic increased such that they literally ran out of places for people to sit here. So his dollar would increase, profit would increase by making that. And I think it comes down not only to the dollar, but it comes down to the point of common sense and dollars and cents. That if people want to buy here, why would you deny them? It comes down to the idiocy of it all. I'm going to deny this person spending $1 in my place of business simply because of how they looked. And I think that was one of the principles of the sit-in movement, to really turn the mirror on the city and the merchants. Because remember, if Elm Street could talk, there were several businesses along this street that would deny service, deny entry to people of color simply because of their race. And it turned the mirror on them to say, I'm really denying myself by denying these people because of their race. And so absolutely the dollar won that day.
Is the diagram of the depot as it stood back in the day. Just check out the differences in the waiting areas. Check out the sizes. Check out the amenities that were afforded the white patrons that the colored patrons did not have. And that colored waiting room, it looks small in that diagram. I'm telling you, it's small, because I went down there one day just to see. The segregated waiting rooms, they're getting ready to get on the buses where they're going to get segregated again. We're told in some parts of the South, black folk will get on the bus at the front, pay, have to get off of the bus, walk around to the side of the bus, which became the back of the bus, to get back on the bus. That is, if the bus driver didn't pull off.
The sit-ins were risky business for these 4 young men. They were going to be provoked, but they were well prepared. They bought items at the register and then sat down at the counter. A very strategic move.
So we have to remember that at this time, these young people did not just go off on a whim. So they had been trained. And for those who lived here, their parents were involved in community organizations like the NAACP, as were their educators. So they were very well trained in the matter of peaceful protesting. But as you stated, there was the genius of going to purchase something elsewhere in the store and then return to this lunch counter and sit down with receipt in hand as proof. You served me here. Now why won't you serve me here? Again, we're turning the mirror on this whole notion of segregation. So it makes the business itself question itself, take a long, hard look at itself. But then it also brings to light the notion that while you'll serve me elsewhere, I won't be served here. So as a person of color, this wait staff, which is white, would not serve me. It brings back the understanding that segregation is simply the sequel to the movie called Slavery. So whereas on the plantation, the slave could not eat at the master's table, but could work in the master's kitchen, in turn, in segregation, people of color could not sit at this lunch counter, but they could work behind it. So as we know, there were actually wait staff of color that worked here at that time and still could not serve people who looked like them across that counter. So it brings all of this to light, and it brings back the continuance of those notions from slavery into segregation. But again, it turns a very, very well-polished mirror against segregation and those that supported it.
1, 2, 3. Woke up this morning with my mind stayed on freedom. Woke up this morning with my mind.
So the tour experience here at the International Civil Rights Center and Museum varies. So we have roughly 15 galleries that will kind of start out giving you an overview of slavery, its abolishment, the rising of the Klan, its influence, and then we move into really the impact of racism and segregation in this country, and then we progress into the fight against it, and then culminating to where we are today. Each tour staff person here brings their own flavor to the tour. So, you know, when people come and say, we have several people who will come and say, well, I just brought my family here, or I'm bringing a guest here, and I'm going to let them go through the tour. I've been here already, and we stop them right then. Perhaps you have been here before, but I promise you, you won't have the same experience. So we do have repeat guests who come time and time again, because every tour guide is a different experience. Some of our tour staffers bring more statistics. They're a little more information-based statistics and that type of thing. We have some who are more of a narrative experience. I personally, my tour is more entertaining. So I keep things light. I keep a lot of humor, a lot of entertainment in my presentation. However, I don't sugarcoat the facts. So, you know, that's one caveat that I give to guests. I do not sugarcoat. I give you the facts just how they are, but I do make it a little more easier, a little more entertaining to learn, but nonetheless, you do learn when you leave my tour experience. So we encourage people to come and have the experience time and time again, because it varies each time that you visit with us, with each tour guide. But the tour itself is, for some people, a roller coaster of emotions. So, you know, the first part of the tour is, even for me, gut-wrenching. I see it every day, but there are some days that I simply cannot handle it. It's gut-wrenching.
The museum offers a variety of different types of tours, including online tours that are available.
Yes, that's the beauty of COVID. So that's one benefit that we have had because of COVID. Necessity is the mother of creativity. So we had to figure out a way that we could remain open, remain connected to the public, and still provide the experience and education. So we developed a virtual platform that people can experience the museum from the comfort and safety of their homes, offices, and classrooms. People can get a live tour experience. So you can see every gallery with a tour guide guiding you through. And at the end, a live person is there to conduct a Q&A, to provide some extended context for our guest. So it's available. I like to tell teachers, it's the field trip that you never leave for. So it's aided schools in that you can take your students on a field trip without the burden of cost and travel. But it's also enabled us to broaden our reach. So we've had the pleasure of conducting these experiences with schools on the West Coast. It's allowing us to go international with our reach, with guests, because, you know, during normal times, we do have people who actually come to the U.S. solely to come to this museum. Absolutely. We've had people come from France, from England. We've had them from all corners of the earth who come to America solely to visit this museum. So we're now able to go back and reach them virtually.
The museum requires masks and sanitization upon entry.
When we reopened to the public, it was important to us that we provide the service that we do here, but also be responsible. Do it responsibly for the safety of our staff, but also for our visitors. So we do require upon entry that everyone sanitizes, and mask, cloth covered, face coverings are required to cover the nose and the mouth at all times while you're within our facility. While we know that some of our guests are vaccinated, as our entire staff is fully vaccinated, it is still important for us to take every precaution to protect one another. And we appreciate those who visit with us, who understand and welcome that and participate, understanding that we are doing this for our safety and for yours as well, because we want to educate but do it responsibly. So face coverings are required regardless of vaccination status, and sanitization as well.
The museum mainly does a staff-led tour. However, they do offer a self-guided tour as an option as well.
In addition to the staff-led tours, which do require, for the most part, a reservation, provided that there's room available, walk-ins can come aboard a staff-led tour, we offer what is called a seated and walk-through experience. So guests can come at any time, and they start out comfortably seated watching the filmed version of our guided tour, which is conducted by our senior staff. And once the film ends, they can then explore our galleries on their own. So some people do prefer that method because it allows them time to stop and read and take it all in, so at their leisure. So that option is available to our visitors. So we invite you to learn more about the International Civil Rights Center and Museum at our website at www.sitinmovement.org. There you can learn about the tour offerings, make your reservations, but you can also find out about our programming. We have wonderful program partnership with UNCG's Educational Department, which offers our Saturday Children's Story Hour. So this is a fully equipped site that parents and teachers can use, and has a full lesson plan, read-along video, and also make and take projects with things you can find around your home to keep your children occupied and also have them learning at the same time. And you can learn about upcoming events that we have. We do have our annual gala that's coming up in February, our awards program, so learn more about that, and past events that we've had that are recorded. You can find that there on our website as well. We also invite people to connect with us on social media at Facebook and Instagram. We are the Sit-In Museum.